Davis and I have known each other for over 15 years now. He's always been a tremendous mentor to me ever since I started as a community organizer in Pittsburgh. Came back to Pittsburgh from Chicago and organizing other parts of the country, and started registering voters, started helping people in marginalized communities like the one that I'm from exercise their collective power. And Lee really helped guide me through the process of being a young organizer. So I've always been grateful to you for that, Lee. And even now, you've answered the call and you're still there helping me out all along the way. So thank you.
Very welcome. Very welcome.
What could the system do better, or how could the community better respond to persons who are initiating, going through the reentry process and looking for those supports?
One of the biggest things that the system can do, and community, can have some therapeutic support or some mental health things in place for a person coming home. I can't stress enough, when I came home, I was ordered to take mental health and therapy, which was awesome. And I fought it at first, but I'm like, I'm not crazy. We have that stigmatism tied to mental health and all that. Yep. So once I went through the process and I bought into it, it was amazing. And it helped me, look at life a little bit different, look through a different lens, and understand some of the things that were not only just going on around me and may have happened to me, but it made me look at myself and say, you know what, I'm not going to go down that path again. I know the destruction that I caused, the people that I hurt. So that's a big thing is that therapeutic support, mental health piece, along with, probation or parole, having some things to actually offer you as far as help, as opposed to just watching you, monitoring you, and telling you to come in and take the so-called P-test thing. That seems like the biggest thing is to them is taking that test and getting money from you. And there's so many other things that they can do as far as resources and guiding you in the right direction and pointing some things out to you. So I think those two things are pretty big.
That's so insightful that you mentioned mental health. Incarceration is traumatizing.
Yes, it is.
Inherently. And sometimes when I'm sitting in arraignment court and I'm setting bail and I'm looking at somebody's risk assessment report and I see that they've served a term of incarceration, especially if it was recent, I'll ask them, have you sought counseling? Have you sought mental health support? And sometimes the reaction will be similar to what you just said. Oh, I'm not crazy. Or you'll hear folks express what is the stigma of mental health and seeking help for one's mental health, right? And I'll explain to folks like this: listen, you have gone through a period of incarceration. You have experienced an arrest within the last 12 hours. Whether or not you know it, you have experienced trauma. And that is an injury to one's mental health. Now, if you fell and broke your leg, would you go to the hospital? If you were physically harmed, would you go see a doctor? Of course. So why should one feel any different about their own mental health?
I agree with you.
And I just try to relate it to folks like that. You mentioned, having supports in place, seeing yourself and others have those supports and find the right path after reentry versus some who didn't. Some who didn't have those supports, some who all they had was supervision, and they ended up back behind bars, back in the system. I have a similar story that I think about a lot whenever I have these conversations, which is I had two friends growing up, one that was from my neighborhood in East Liberty. His family was an adoptive family. He was African-American, and he was caught up in the system ever since he was a little kid. And another friend who I met in high school came from a close-knit kind of nuclear family, lived in the suburbs. We met at Central Catholic, biracial but presents white. And we were, all three of us and others were good friends in high school. And we kind of went our separate ways. And when we did that, they both developed really horrible addictions to hard drugs. And they both ended up getting incarcerated, and they both ended up in the same facility, and they both got out about a month before I graduated from law school. And I was just always amazed by how different their paths were after that. 100% from my perspective, based on the difference between having support and not having support, only having supervision versus having supervision and support. My friend that grew up with me in East Liberty, he's actually no longer with us. He fell back into his addiction. He ended up being incarcerated again, and he passed away about 1.5 years ago.
Man, sorry to hear
as
that,
a result of a drug overdose. Whereas my other friend, he came out and he had family in place. He had a job in place.
Right.
He had a roof over his head in place. He had all of these supports there for him that my other friend did not. And that's why I call this the tale of two brothers. It's like the tale of two Pittsburghs that everybody's talking about now.
Right.
And so I think about that, and I think about what does a restorative approach look like, and what can we learn from these lived experiences?
Man, that, we see that all too often, man. The tale of two cities, tale of two people. And, first of all, I'm sorry to hear about your friend, man. And, I think we've all probably been through that now in the city with the opioid addiction and all that sort of stuff. And then dealing with, incarceration versus treatment, how we treat people that go through those things. And I will say this, when I was incarcerated, there were so many guys that when they called for pill line, you'd be amazed to see how long the line was for guys to get medication. And so just think about those guys having to come home and not know where to get that medication now or get treatment. And so they fall into, getting it from the streets or whoever they can get it from. So that's a whole nother issue that we got to deal with, man, that nobody talks about as far as the prison system.
Right. You get out and where is your medical care? Where is your housing?
Right.
Where is your job opportunity? How can you reasonably be expected to support yourself with only having a probation or parole officer?
Right.
What sense does that make? And my other friend, he now has a beautiful family.
Right.
He's got a job that he enjoys. He's got his own house. He's bought a house. He's doing really well. He's a success story, not unlike your own.
Right. And that's amazing. And again, I'm glad you're doing this and we're talking about it because people need to hear these stories and understand the importance of having support. Because that's the main thing about all of this is having that support when you come home and, not coming back home, getting thrown back into the fire that you was already in, before you went to prison.
Lee, I wanted to ask you, I mean, you know this personally, you've lived through it. When we talk about restorative justice, we talk about a healing process. What does that healing process look like for someone who's initiating the process or becoming a reentrant?
Well, the first person and the first, thing you have to address is your heart and your mind. And so as an individual, once you address those things and become right with yourself, then you can move on to, dealing with your family members who may have been hurt, by the things that you may have done or the things that they had to go through with you. Because a lot of times your family has to go through these things with you when you're incarcerated, and it takes a toll on them. And so when you come home, you make amends with your family, after you, again, get yourself together, get your spirit together, you make amends with your family, and then you do what you and I did. You go into the community and do what you can to help, some of those that suffer from maybe some of the things you did, or just maybe suffering in general from their circumstances or the community that they're in. And so you dive in and you help the best way you can. And that can be, in various ways. But even with helping the community and folks that are around you that may have gone through things that you have went through, that's still a part of healing for you as a person as well. You know what I mean? So all that stuff plays a part in the individual being successful and really healing himself, family, and community all together. How would you deal with supervision versus support, as far as, the incarceration piece or coming home, re-entry, and all that sort of stuff?
That's an excellent question. Number one, as a judge in the Court of Common Pleas, you have an opportunity to interact directly with administrative agencies within the court, like adult probation, and to work with adult probation to ensure that they're implementing restorative practices, to ensure that they're hiring folks who are really dedicated to helping the folks that are under their supervision recover from the reentry process successfully. Working closely with these agencies is a key function of common pleas judges. The other piece to it is working not within the system, but outside the system. There's so many folks after 2020 and after the crescendo of criminal justice reform that's been growing over so many years. There's so many organizations within the community, whether medical services providers, whether community-based organizations, or otherwise, that are just dying to be involved in the criminal justice system, to be involved in the process and to help the system do better. Now, we as judges have a responsibility to have close ties with those organizations, close ties with the community, close ties with folks like yourself, who could do so much to support others who are going through an almost impossible process just between them and probation, or just between them and their families. That's not enough. There has to be outreach outside of the system, and it has to be closely linked together. And a common pleas judge, especially someone with my background in community organizing and government, is in a tremendous position to make those connections and to make that happen. And I don't think most people realize how hard it is for a reentrant. I don't think that people realize that there are tens of thousands of laws in the United States that restrict the rights of people who have even just been charged with a crime, what they call collateral consequences of criminal justice involvement. And this is in addition to a punishment. This is in addition to a sentence. This is in addition to a term of probation. These are all the things that you can't do because you've got a record. You can't apply for student loans. You can't have public housing or be in public housing. And that just barely scratches the surface. And so the question to me is, at what point is enough enough in terms of retribution? And at what point are we going to take what we know works better, which is a restorative approach? Start normalizing restorative justice for the purpose of advancing a more equitable and humane justice system.
I'm with you on that, man. And not just talk about it, let's actually practice it. Let's actually put it into play. So I'm so happy and thrilled that, you're on the right side of history and the right side of justice, man. And so thank you for what you're doing.